In the political scene, it looks like Rick Perry is the new Republican frontrunner, and that means that everybody shoots at him, and that's exactly what happened in that last night's debate.
That's right, but although it was his first national debate, he seemed confident in going on the attack against fellow Republicans. David Brody has the story from Simi Valley, California.
When you're a presidential frontrunner, the safe strategy might be to lay back and play it safe. Well, Rick Perry tore that page out of the playbook in the first few minutes by taking on his closest rival, Mitt Romney.
We created more jobs in the last 3 months in Texas than he created in 4 years in Massachusetts.
Texas has zero income tax. Texas has a right-to-work state, a Republican legislature, a Republican Supreme Court. Texas has a lot of oil and gas in the ground. Those are wonderful things. But Governor Perry doesn't believe that he created those things. If he tried to say that, well, it'd be like Al Gore saying he invented the Internet.
Michael Dukakis created jobs 3 times faster than you did, Mitt.
As a matter of fact, George Bush and his predecessor created jobs at a faster rate than you did, Governor.
That's not correct.
Yeah, that is correct.
Former Governor John Huntsman then called out both of the former governors.
I hate to rain on the parade of the great Lone Star governor, but as governor of Utah, we were the #1 job creator in this country during my years of serving. That was 5.9% when you were creating jobs at 4.9%. And to my good friend Mitt, 47th just ain't going to cut it, my friend.
Herman Cain leaned on his business experience to lay out a plan of his own.
A 9% tax on corporate income, a 9% tax on personal income, and a 9% national sales tax. If 10% is good enough for God, 9% ought to be good enough for the federal government.
On the subject of Social Security, Mitt Romney went after Perry over his labeling the system a failure.
You can't say that to tens of millions of Americans who live on Social Security and those who have lived on it.
Perry's description of Social Security being a Ponzi scheme has even put him on the defensive against influential Republicans like Karl Rove.
You know, Karl has been over the top for a long time in some of his remarks, so, you know, I'm not responsible for Karl anymore.
Michelle Bachmann, Rick Santorum, and Ron Paul joined in the Perry bashing because he signed an executive order that would have required young Texas girls to be vaccinated against cervical cancer. Perry pointed out that there was an opt-out provision, but that didn't stop his critics.
I would expect this from President Obama. I would not expect this from someone who's calling himself a conservative governor.
Forcing 12-year-old girls to take an inoculation to prevent this sexually transmitted disease. This is not good medicine.
It is wrong for government, whether it's state or federal government, to impose on parents what they must do to inoculate their children.
With all the GOP verbal skirmishes that took place Wednesday night, Newt Gingrich laid the blame at the feet of the media.
Well, I'm frankly not interested in your effort to get Republicans fighting each other.
Now that the Republican debate is over in California, we move on to Florida, where there are 2 more debates here in the next few weeks. Rick Perry is going to continue to come under attack from his opponents, and as they say in Texas, he better saddle up. David Brody, CBN News, in Simi Valley, California.
Ronald Reagan set the tone when he said the 11th commandment for Republicans, thou shalt not speak ill of any fellow Republicans. They better learn that, because I guess the Democrats are licking their chops as the Republicans eviscerate one another in these debates. But maybe that's the way to do it. Okay. Well, Lee Webb has the rest of our top stories from the CBN Newsroom. Lee?
Well, Pat, tonight President Obama tells Congress and the American people about his latest plans to create jobs and get the economy moving. Jennifer Wishon tells us what to expect.
President Obama walks into the U.S. Capitol tonight with a heavy assignment: deliver a plan that gets America working again.
This is an opportunity, Mr. President. We'll look forward to hearing from you.
Last month, the U.S. economy failed to add any new jobs. The last time that happened, Franklin D. Roosevelt was in the White House.
We're fighting for good jobs with good wages.
The president is expected to announce a $300 billion package full of tax cuts and spending. That includes a 1-year extension of the payroll tax cut for workers, an extension on unemployment benefits, tax incentives for businesses that hire, and spending on infrastructure improvements.
We've got more than 1 million unemployed construction workers ready to get dirty right now.
Some Republicans are already questioning the president's proposals.
He's talking about $300 billion or more spending, and that's going in the wrong direction.
But White House officials say it will all be paid for.
He will make the claim that these are the measures that will that can be taken, that have historically had bipartisan support, can be acted on very quickly by Congress, and can have a very quick and positive impact on the economy and on employment.
The president isn't just addressing members of Congress. He's talking to voters. His approval rating hit a record low this week, and now nearly 8 in 10 Americans say the country is on the wrong track.
I thought he was going to create those jobs he promised. I mean, any kind of jobs. But it's gotten worse.
Scott Paul runs the Alliance for American Manufacturing. He hopes to hear a short and long-term vision for jobs from the president.
We need much more aggressive policies on trade, on taxes, on training a skilled workforce, on investing in our infrastructure, and certainly on innovation and research and development.
At one point, it appeared the president might compete with pregame coverage of an NFL game. That's no longer the case. What's clear is that he's battling an economy that's threatening his chances at his second term in the White House. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Washington.
Well, Pat, you think we'll hear the term shovel ready tonight?
I think he's got a shovel in his mouth. I think that shovel didn't work last time. Actually, that stimulus, so-called, paid off the left-wing supporters of the Democrat Party. That's where the money went. It didn't go to really get anything going. That's why it's been such a failure. And we showed yesterday, I believe, on this program that federal regulations are costing us $1.7 trillion a year. $1 trillion a year. Regulations, that's how much the drain on the country goes. He's not addressing the terrible things that his administration is doing to hurt jobs. He talks about creating jobs, but the people who make the jobs don't know what to do. They don't know what the tax structure is going to be. They don't know who's going to be favored and who isn't. And we have that disaster, that solar company that got over $500 million loans from the government, then it went bankrupt. So, I mean, it's not working out, Mr. President. And a 30, 35-minute speech tonight ain't going to make the difference, in my opinion. Lee?
Pat, the so-called Super Committee holds its first meeting today. The group was formed to cut up to $1.5 trillion from the federal deficit over the next decade. Democrats want a combination of spending cuts and tax increases. Republicans oppose new taxes, but some say they could go along with closing some tax loopholes. Now, some Democrats say they want the group to include job creation as part of its work. They argue that economic growth will bring more money into Washington, and that will help cut the deficit. But many Republicans counter the best way to help the economy is to cut Washington's overspending. Pat?
Well, you know, the thing I remember, maybe we all remember, is that under George Bush, the stimulus was to give everybody a couple $100. Do you remember that?
I remember it well.
Waste of money.
Yeah, a big waste of money.
Totally waste of money. But they just passed it out, and then everybody felt good, and the Democrats said, oh, look, we've helped all the poor. I mean, $200 didn't mean anything to anybody, and it was just one of those stupid initiatives that the government, maybe it was $600, I forget how much it was, but whatever it was, it wasn't enough to make a difference.
Didn't dent.
It didn't dent, instead of putting it where it really mattered. And where it really matters is you drastically cut the corporate tax rate. You drastically take away the regulations that are impeding business. You drastically cut back the power of the National Labor Relations Board, which is forbidding Boeing from setting up a plant in South Carolina in order to make the Dreamliner. I mean, this kind of stuff is what's impeding job creation and slowing down our economy. Then you look at Dodd-Frank's and the financial, people don't even know what the implementation of that's going to be, but it scared the financial people all to death. And in my opinion, the Sarbanes-Oxley has just been a disaster in terms of the formation. The United States used to be #1 in the world in terms of IPOs, initial public offerings. Now we've fallen down the line. London went ahead of us, and Hong Kong, Singapore, these other countries, because people don't want to get involved in Sarbanes-Oxley. The cost of compliance can be, for a small business, as much as $3 million a year. They just can't afford it. So, I mean, yeah, come on, Mr. President, Congress, get with it.
Indeed.
Another Texas congressman is calling for the resignation of the director of the National Cemetery in Houston. CBN News has been following this story for a few months. Veterans and their families have claimed they've been banned from mentioning God and Jesus at funerals. They also say Cemetery Director Arlene Ocasio restricted the religious speech of volunteers. Republican Ted Poe has introduced legislation prohibiting the Veterans Administration from censoring religion at funerals. Republican John Culberson says Ocasio's salary should be stripped from the military appropriations bill. California's ban on same-sex marriage is now in the hands of the state Supreme Court. Voters passed Proposition 8 3 years ago, but a federal judge struck it down. California's governor and attorney general have refused to defend the law in court. Tuesday, justices heard arguments on whether the sponsors of Proposition 8 have legal standing to appeal. The court has 90 days to issue its opinion. You can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.